Well, good morning, everybody. You look fantastic. You sound great. And not everybody gets to look like an Easter egg today, but I do. And I'm so glad that I get to wear my new color today. People have been making fun of me this morning. My name is Joel. I'm the lead pastor and apparently the butt of the jokes because people are like, oh, that's a new shirt. That's a new color for you. And apparently, I only wear 3 colors. Here's number 4. Glad you're with us today. If you're a guest, we are really this relaxed. We take Jesus very seriously, but we don't take ourselves that seriously. But we hope you stop by the guest center when we're done today, as we said in the video. Just want to spend a few minutes with you, give you a gift. It's not going to take long, but just a way to put a name with your face. And we don't want you just to be a face in the crowd. You're important to Jesus, and you're important to us. For those of you joining us online, welcome to you as well. And I'm probably glowing on camera. I don't know. But I'm glad you're there today. And if you're looking for a great Sunday to join us, next Sunday would be fantastic. Because as much as we are so happy you are there, I promise you will love it when you are here. Now, I'm standing on this side of the stage today because this balloon means last week somebody committed their life to Jesus, and we want to celebrate that today. We got this idea from a pastor for a long time who gave us the idea because the Scripture says that there is more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner coming to Jesus than all the others who already have Jesus, that heaven ignites a party when someone comes to him. And so we decided to pick up his idea and say, let's celebrate and join in with this celebration of life. And that's what Resurrection Sunday is all about, is life. And I want to start the message, though, by talking a little bit about chaos and chaotic living. Maybe you know that person who is always late. You know that person that if you tell them you need to be there at 8 o'clock, they roll in at 8:15. 9 o'clock, you got to be there at 9, 9:20, they come rolling in. Hey, I need you to meet me at noon. I got to be back at work by 1. About 12:30, they come rolling into the restaurant. Maybe you go to the other extreme and it's 8 p.m. The movie starts at 8:10. Got to be there. Meet me at 8 p.m. out front. 8:30, they come walking in. And when they come walking in, they make a scene. I mean, they just come in like everything's exploding around. They're like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm late. And they tell you 100 reasons why they're late, because they're always late. And there's always something going on. They're the most unlucky people in the world. They're always late, and they're just in constant chaos. And if you don't know a person like that, you're that person, all right? But sorry, someone's got to tell you the truth, and that's the truth. If you don't know that person, you are that person. In someone else's life, you drive OCD people like me nuts. You tell me 8 o'clock, I'm there at 7:50. Don't tell me a fake time, because that's the other thing. We learn to tell these people fake times to get them there on time. If you need them there at 10, you say, I need you there at 9:30. They come rolling at 9:50, and you're like, gotcha. Because they just have these chaotic lives. Or maybe you know that person that they just are always taken advantage of. Like, you just feel bad for these people because every time they turn around, someone's taking them on some ride for something. If it's not money, it's an emotional ride. They always just are kind of falling apart on someone else's behalf. And then when we get to know them, we realize that they really have no boundaries in their life. They really have no way of knowing where they end and someone else begins. And so they just kind of carry everybody's problems, and it just kills them. It just tears them down. They have an emotional chaos, and they don't even know why. Because all of this is really built on this idea that our lives are in spiritual chaos, that we're falling apart on the inside. Genesis chapter 3, almost at the beginning of the Bible, tells us why. That originally everything was perfect, and there wasn't chaos, and there wasn't people being late. I don't know how they told time back then, but nobody was late. There was no stress. There was no worry. There was no chaos. And then Genesis 3 came along, and everything changed. And suddenly sin entered the human race, and suddenly everything fell apart. Our relationship with God fell apart. Our relationship with each other fell apart. Our relationship with creation fell apart. It all got broken. And so then the rest of the Bible story up until the New Testament, up until really the resurrection of the New Testament, is about God making that right again, and God coming after us and making these moves to bring people back to Him because our lives are falling apart. And all this other stuff is just the evidence of what's already happening on the inside of us. And as disciples of Jesus, we're supposed to know better because we understand that Resurrection Sunday is that annual reminder of really what we do every Sunday. But it's a special Sunday because it reminds us of that day that Jesus rose from the dead. That what makes Christianity unique is there is no grave. That's what makes it unique. That as a theologian said, if the resurrection of Jesus didn't happen, then nothing else really matters. Christianity is just another religion, as long as you're happy and you die like a plant, and that's it. But if Jesus rose from the dead, it's all that matters. And suddenly everything changes, just like it changed in Genesis 3. It changes now. And Resurrection Sunday, Easter Sunday, is that day that we remember, that's right, it changed everything. But as disciples of Jesus, we should know better, but if you're anything like me, sometimes we don't act better. We don't act like we live in that reality. Instead, we live these chaotic lives, and we're falling apart, and we fail to see the very source of the solution. We have the source to the solution right in our hands, available to us on smartphones and smart devices, and then we live life without the owner's manual. And we wonder why we keep falling apart. Well, I have really good news, and that is today we're starting a brand new series to address that. A series called The Ways of the Wise, and we're actually going through selections from the book of Proverbs in the Old Testament. In full confession, I've been looking forward to this series since June of last year when we put it on the calendar and we got it all mapped out. I've been looking forward to this because this is how we live, because Resurrection Sunday changes everything. And it changes how we live and changes how we approach the world and how we approach each other and how we approach our relationships and how we approach living as humans. And so today we start the very first message of this, which means if this is your first Sunday here in a while or your first time ever, you've not missed anything. This one's brand new, and it's going to take us all the way through the end of May. We'll break it on Mother's Day. Hope we see everyone back with your mom on Mother's Day. And then we'll go right through the end of May with this one. But today we start message number 1, wisdom for chaos. That there's a solution for chaos, and God has given us this wisdom to handle the chaos in our lives. And most of this message series will actually combine 2 or 3 different sections of Proverbs together. So it's going to be a little bit of a seek and find mission here. But we're going to start off on page 434 in the Pew Bible in front of you. Now, if you have your smartphone, just get to Proverbs chapter 3, right at the beginning of it, and you can, a few clicks of your fingertips, you can get there with us. But Proverbs chapter 3, 1 and 2 is where we're going to start. It's page 434 in the Pew Bible in front of you, and if you don't have a print Bible of your own and you'd like one, keep it. That's a gift. We love seeing these Bibles come and go every week. It is so cool to be part of that in your life. So thank you for giving us the honor of being part of that. But wisdom for chaos, page 434 in the Pew Bible in front of you, Proverbs 3, 1 and 2 for the rest of us looking it up on our own, because I really want you to see this. I want you to see what God has to say. This stuff will really change your life. Proverbs 3, 1 and 2 says, "My son, do not forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart, for they will prolong your life many years and bring you peace and prosperity." See, wisdom brings a good life. Most of the Proverbs were written by the wisest person to ever live, King Solomon of Israel. And he's training his son, Rehoboam, how to be king. Now, if you know your biblical history, Rehoboam wasn't the best king in the world. He didn't pay much attention to his dad, which is probably why his dad said, "Son, don't forget my teachings. Keep them in your heart." Why does he need them in his heart? He could have just said, keep them in your mind, but he didn't say that. He said his heart because that's where it actually will affect his behavior. Once something's down in your heart, it becomes who you are. It becomes now entrenched in what and who you are. And he says, what this does, when you put this in your heart, it brings you a good life, but he even defines what this good life is. He said, this life is a life that is stress-free, or at least low stress. He's going to be king. He's not going to be stress-free. But low stress, it's going to be a life that will bless him and bless others. It will have a restful attitude. And also will lead him to prosperity, which is not just a financial term. It's a term meaning the whole of life, that he'll have relational prosperity. He'll have spiritual prosperity. And yeah, there'll be some fiscal stuff there too, because wisdom brings a good life. Now, on to the other end of the book of Proverbs, in Proverbs 30, we have kind of a parallel going on here at the very end of the book. But Proverbs 30 was written by someone else. Same Holy Spirit inspired it, but a different person got to write it down. And this person's name was Agur, and he was the son of Jacob. This is one of my favorite parts of Proverbs. I'm probably going to say that every Sunday, so forgive the hyperbole, but for this week, this is my favorite part. Proverbs 30, 7 through 9 says this, 2 things I ask of you, Lord. Do not refuse me before I die. Keep falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise I may have too much and disown you and say, who is the Lord? Or I may become poor and steal and so dishonor the name of my God. Now, this was a very self-aware person. That's a real buzzword today, but this was a very self-aware person. He was already very wise, and self-awareness changes our prayers. When we know ourselves, we will pray very differently. How do we get to know ourselves? Biblical wisdom. Wisdom reveals this to us, and he realized that there was something in him he needed, and so he prays this incredible prayer. I love this prayer. He says, Lord, give me neither riches nor poverty. But before he gets there, he says, keep falsehood and lies far from me. Now, I know it's kind of a Sunday school answer to go, well, yeah, we don't need to lie. Lying is bad. Okay. That said, here's what he's trying to get at, though. Someone can tell you the truth 95% of the time and lie to you 5% of the time, but that 5% is enough for you to question the 95%. That's why we don't trust politicians, right? They may be telling you the truth 95% of the time. I don't personally think so, but your mileage may vary. But let's assume they are. That 5% is enough for us to question everything else they're saying. Pastors too, by the way. I mean, it just works for any field you're in, I suppose, if you're talking to a bunch of people. And so he says, Lord, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be a person that people question what I say. Keep that far from me. May just truth be on my lips. It's not saying perfect. You can't be perfect. It's not saying you're not going to make a mistake. It's not going to say that you say 5 when you really mean to say 4. We're not talking about mistakes. We're talking about intentional lying. He says, keep that from me. And then his second request is the part we focus on. He says, give me neither poverty nor riches. How many of us actually pray that? Most of the time, we sound kind of like the character in Fiddler on the Roof, where we're like, would it really mess with some great cosmic plan if I were a wealthy man? Would it really mess up the universe, Lord, if you just made me a millionaire? That's how most of us pray. Lord, just give me a lot, and I won't ask for anything else. What he says is, Lord, just give me enough. Just whatever that is, give me enough. That's amazing. Now, some people will pick on this prayer, and they'll say, well, see, that's because having riches is a sin. But that's taking out of context and putting that in 21st century American, we're angry about everything life. In the time he's writing, wealth was a sign of God's blessing. So he's not praying against God's blessing. He's saying, don't give me that extreme. But he also says, don't make me poor either. That's not a sin either. He says both. But that's not a sin to be poor either. But he says, don't give me the extremes. And then he answers the why. Why doesn't he want that? That's in verse 9. Look at it again. Otherwise, I may have too much and disown you and say, who is the Lord? I did this myself. I earned this. This is my money. The Lord didn't give that. I did this. He says, don't do that. I don't want to say that. On the contrary, or I may become poor and steal. In other words, have to steal just to provide for needs, and so dishonor the name of my God. That is mind-blowing, because that means wisdom is more than just intelligence. Wisdom is not just knowing stuff or applying stuff. And you got to follow me on this journey, because this is where English gets a little weak on us. Because if you look these up on dictionary.com, some of these words are almost interchangeable in English, and so I have to kind of give you a framework that we're going to say every week, okay? Maybe you've heard the expression, intelligence is knowing there's a snake in the grass, and wisdom is staying out of the grass. It works. It's okay. It means, in other words, intelligence is knowledge, and then wisdom would be acting on that knowledge in a beneficial way. That's a good working definition. But from the Bible's perspective, wisdom is more than intelligence. Wisdom also has a moral and ethical undertone. Let me frame it a different way. If we say intelligence is knowing there's a snake in the grass, wisdom might say stay out of the grass. Biblical wisdom says, but there's a child in the grass with the snake. And now I am obligated to protect that child somehow. So I either have to remove the child or kill the snake. But I can't do both. Which do I do? That's biblical wisdom. That there's a moral and ethical underpinning that doesn't just mean it's just acting on information. So even when the Proverbs talks about financial issues, There's always a moral undertone to it. There's an ethical undertone that is always addressed. If it's not addressed directly, it's assumed, because wisdom is more than intelligence. Biblical wisdom is not just knowing stuff. It's knowing stuff and doing that stuff, but it's built on the foundation of God's ways and God's methods and doing it the way He designed it to be done. You're supposed to know that part first. You're supposed to know the ethics of it, and then the wisdom part takes over. That biblical wisdom is this multi-layer cake that we have to dig through, and you can't just cut out the cake and you can't just cut out the icing. You can't just keep the pithy expression and not have the moral undertone. You got to keep it all layered up and take one big bite of it. Because never forget what Resurrection Sunday means. It's the reminder that our lives were in chaos. That we were the ones, as we said on Good Friday, it was our sin that nailed Him there. It wasn't nails that held the Son of God to the cross, it was love. Love to fulfill His mission on earth to redeem us and save us from our spiritual chaos. And disciples of Jesus, better than anyone, we know what we've been saved from. We have enough wisdom that God has put in us to know what we were and what we are. And praise Jesus, we can see what we're supposed to be. We can see that movement. We know that. And so if I want to summarize this message and really the entire book of Proverbs, it's this. The Lord's wisdom brings order to chaos. The Lord's wisdom brings order to chaos. If you wonder why our culture is slap crazy right now, it's because the Lord's wisdom is not in the equation. Now, if you've heard me talk for more than 2 or 3 Sundays, you know that I'm not just bashing the world because they're an easy target, okay? Don't shoot the hostage. The world acts like the world because it doesn't know any better. Our job is to bring the Lord's wisdom to the equation. Our job is to be ambassadors for Jesus. Don't bash the culture until you're ready to get in there and get your hands dirty and say, now, let me show you, as the Apostle Paul would say, the most excellent way. Let me show you the way that this is supposed to be done. Because the Lord's wisdom brings order to chaos. And if I had to summarize the entire book of Proverbs, this is what I'd say. If someone said, Joel, summarize all 31 chapters of the book of Proverbs, written by different authors under the Holy Spirit's inspiration, covering every range of human behavior, from relationships to money to buying property to selling property to greed to parenting to marriage. If I had to summarize all of it, the Lord's wisdom brings order to chaos. Because by ourselves, we're chaotic. Without Jesus, of course, we're going to be in chaos. That's where the world is. Our job is to bring the Lord's wisdom to it. See, Jesus said this about that issue, John 14, 21 through 24. He says, whoever has my commands and keeps them is the one who loves me. In other words, it's not just having good, positive thoughts about Jesus. Man, I really like Jesus. He's a swell guy. No, He's the Son of God. And He says, whoever has my commands and keeps them is the one who loves me. See, there's that whole action bias to the Lord's wisdom. It's movement, it's behavior, it changes us. The one who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I too will love them and show myself to them. Then Judas, not Judas Iscariot. Judas Iscariot was the betrayer of Jesus. This is the other one. Did you know there were 2 Judases in the apostles? That's the other one. He wrote the book of Jude in the New Testament. By that point in history, he shortened his name. I would too if I was associated with Jesus' betrayer. I don't blame the guy. But at this point, John still records him as Judas. I guess John wanted to use his given name, I guess. But he asked, Lord, why do you intend to show yourself to us and not to the world? And get this, Jesus replies, anyone who loves me, here he goes again, will obey my teaching. He said it twice. If Jesus says it once, pay attention. But if He says it twice, you better underline it in blood. Prick a finger and underline that thing. Don't really do that. That's kidding. My Father will love them, and we will come to them and make our home with them. Anyone who does not love me will not obey my teaching. See, that's the world. They don't pretend to be disciples of Jesus. Why should we expect them? Again, you can't blame the world for acting like the world. They don't love Him. They don't keep His teaching. I don't expect that from them. I'm talking about us. These words you hear are not my own. They belong to the Father who sent me, because the Lord's wisdom brings order to chaos. And since Genesis 3, Jesus has been trying to bring order to our chaos. And when He died on that cross and He rose from the dead, He finally sealed the deal and showed us a way that we could find living like we had never known it before. So instead of having chaotic living, the Lord Jesus offers us contented living. See, nobody wants to get to the end of their life and go, man, I wasted my life on junk that didn't even matter. I was worried about stuff and stressed about stuff and just freaking out about stuff that didn't even make a hill of beans difference. Nobody wants to do that. See, that's chaos. Nobody actually wants that. And the Lord offers us contented living. Many years ago, and I don't know how many years now, I tried to figure it up and I have no clue. Sometime in our married life, my wife, Patty, started challenging people to read a chapter of Proverbs every day. There's 31 Proverbs, chapters of Proverbs, and there's 31 days in the longest month. It works out. Longest month, shortest month works out for us in the West. And she challenged people to do that. So I picked up on that challenge too because she was doing it, and I'm like, well, if she's doing it, I want to do it. And what was amazing is it changed how I spoke. I actually found myself, instead of just quoting maybe some of my favorite authors, or maybe instead of quoting some of my favorite world leaders or something, I would start quoting these Proverbs. I'd start saying, I'd even say it like as an expression, I would say, as a dog returns to its vomit. That's one of the Proverbs. As a dog returns to its vomit, so a fool returns to his folly. It changes how you speak. And it really started changing my life because it changed some of the chaos in my mind. It changed some of the judgmentalness in my mind. It changed some of the blowing off I might do of someone and they do something really boneheaded and you're like, oh, come on, why would you do that? Because the ways of a fool, that's in the Proverbs too. You see, it changes everything about you and offers you contented living. It shows us how to even address our finances. That's one of the messages we're going to do in this series because that's in there. There's nothing it doesn't cover. That's what's amazing about it. One book and it covers like everything in life. And so I want to give that to you. I've said it before up here, but I want to offer you peace for spiritual chaos. And I want to make that same challenge to you that we have made before. Read a chapter of Proverbs every day. Okay, you're a little behind for April if you're not doing it yet. Just start today on that 9th chapter of Proverbs and just go through the end. We're not trying to be legalistic here. We're just trying to get you into the Word so the Word gets into you. That's all we're trying to do. All right, because that's going to give you peace for spiritual chaos. That's going to start now helping you reorient your perspectives. Because I don't know about you, but I still have to live in this world. I still have to figure out how to make my way through this world. And I work in a 100% Christian environment. I'm a pastor at a church. Okay, we pray in the morning at staff meetings and stuff. I live a great life. My work is wonderful, but I still have to go to places where they're not all Christians. And most of you, the vast majority of you, go and work in places where they're not all Christians. And it's very toxic to your faith. Peace for spiritual chaos. But make no mistake, I don't want you just to read the Proverbs and say, hey, that's some really good stuff. I'm just going to kind of throw that into the hopper, with all the other good expressions I have, A stitch in time saves 9, Give them the whole 9 yards. I'm just going to throw some Proverbs in. Those two are not in the Proverbs. But they are American Proverbs. I'm going to throw, no, I don't mean that. Draw a distinction between the biblical wisdom and secular wisdom because the foundations are different. The foundations are different. They're not the same, and they don't end in the same place. The reason that I even listen to sometimes the financial advisors I listen to is because I know in some cases they're professed Christians. Dave Ramsey's one example. Love him or hate him, he's a professed Christian, and he will say that. And so his foundation for his financial advice are actually right out of the Proverbs. He'll say that. There's nothing new he's saying. He's like, it's all been said for thousands of years. I'm just saying it in a different way. Peace for spiritual chaos. So don't just mix it in with other stuff. No, that's not what we're talking about. But I also want to make sure you don't mix this in and just miss heaven by a country mile, is another expression, a little proverb from my neck of the woods, and just miss it by a country mile because you're doing all these good things and you're saying all these good things, but your heart has not been surrendered to the Lord. See, you need to make sure you have your foundation right first. That you have to have committed your life to Jesus and you're saying, I'm not doing it my way, I'm doing it your way, I'm giving you my heart, I'm surrendering to you. The Bible calls that being saved. What are you being saved from? Hell, lostness, a life without Jesus, I could go on and on. The scriptures go on and on. But that's what lost means. You're saved from that. You're redeemed from that and brought into a new relationship with him. That's the foundation. And on that foundation, now we go into the Proverbs. Now we go into everything. Now, I'll be honest with you. You can be completely lost as a goose and not know Jesus from a hole in the ground. And the Proverbs are still going to work because God's wisdom is still God's wisdom. It's still going to work. Did you know that one of the Proverbs says don't co-sign a loan? Unless it's your spouse. Did you know that? That's in there. That's in the Proverbs. It's still going to work. That's still good financial advice. I know plenty of financial advisors who will say that. Don't co-sign a loan. Why do they say that? It's good advice. It still works. But I don't want you just to do something that works. I want to make sure you do this for the right reasons because you're focusing on Jesus and you're taking another step towards him. But I also want to give you a few more practical ideas from Proverbs because that's what Proverbs is all about. It's just practical advice for wise living, living it Jesus' way. The other one is analyze your margin. Analyze your margin. Is there room for Jesus in your life? Is there room to breathe in your life? This one's hard for some of us. If you're like me, kind of these type A driven, go personalities, I'm going to take that hill by myself if I have to personalities, this one's tough. This one's really hard because Proverbs talks about that too. But analyze your margin, see if there's some space around it. As a congregation, we even do this. As a congregation, we actually minimize our schedule so we don't inadvertently teach you that busyness equals spirituality. Let me rewind that one. I saw some light bulbs. I'm going to say it one more time. Even as a congregation, we intentionally limit our schedule so that we don't inadvertently teach you that busyness equals spirituality. A dear friend of mine who is now with Jesus would often say, if the devil can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. Because you'll just neglect everything that's important. Analyze your margin. Do you have white space on the edge of the papers? That's what we're saying. Part of that means you're going to have to list your top 3 priorities. Now, in your discussion guide this week in your sermon-based small groups, you're going to do 5, but I want to go to 3. Let's talk about 3. Most of you know kind of your top 3 big things, the big rocks in your life. Family, work, hobbies, whatever those things are. List those top 3 priorities, and then ask yourself, are these 3 things that I have to do, are they in chaos or are they in contentment? Now, we can't control what other people do. We can't control their chaos now becoming our chaos. Kind of like the group project. You know, you ever done a group project? Man, I loved it when I got into what was it? I think by the time I got to my doctorate, they finally stopped doing group projects. Somehow higher education figured that out at my doctorate. Because in a group project, I was always the kid that did all the work. I did all the work for everybody else because I wanted to get it right. It was not what I was like in high school. But in college, I was that way. And so now their chaos made my life harder. I'm not talking about what other people do. I'm talking about what you and I do, what we do in these situations. We can't control them. We're going to ask ourselves, is my response to this, is that chaotic? Am I letting that wreck me? Or is it contentment? Because sometimes I'm going to have a flat tire. Sometimes the wheels are going to fall off the trailer. Sometimes life's just going to come at you fast. That's life. That's life. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, but that's life. Am I in contentment with that or chaos with that? And be honest about that with those 3 priorities. And then apply the Lord's wisdom to that. How do you get the Lord's wisdom? The book of Proverbs. There are others too, but that's what we're focused on for the next seven messages. Proverbs, biblical wisdom. Because a life organized around the Lord's wisdom will bring you contentment. Ultimately, it will bring you joy. Because the Lord's wisdom brings order to chaos. And that's the Lord's prescription to give us wisdom for chaos.